just
She works for
and then with Anita, it's already
parks, like a national park advocacy group and stuff.
Yeah,
And so she had
I almost sent an email apologies
a
to Hollywood, but
and
I was so out of it on that day, like with the snow
and
and
then
was
and then
like the
check out
kids.
national parks and that's
But I feel like it was a good meeting because so like Robbie seems to
So
be
yeah,
more
so I got
about this
certified last
stuff
summer and then we went in the fall and then I got to go.
stuff I met, but he's like.
So is he taking over the person we were
I
talking
have a theory. So Justice was leaving, but
Okay.
I think that rather than having us wait to work with the new staff, they're putting Robbie in front of us because he's like a planner and has his own that the Hennepin County engagement cohort stuff apparently.
I remember
So
this room when
that's
it
what
was
it is.
like this, but different.
Because he seems really
Like different
knowledgeable and
tables,
nice
different
and
chairs,
down to earth.
different
And for me, honestly, like the value I see for Carlos at this is like just bringing stuff to us.
Most of the big things stay away from us as we've done. I mean, especially if you're just,
Including new places.
you're never in
Because
like
I'm old, because I remember the mauve purple
parts of the ocean and that's a lot of
And I hope that you can
every once in a while
also,
you
maybe someone can take care of like an event you need to do for the corporate thing.
you know, just see like.
Whichever values you might see all around.
Did you both go through? But I've seen like Ray.
See your announcement again.
Oh, okay. Just for the folks on YouTube, we'll be started in maybe about 10 minutes, just giving folks a chance to get here. We'll be starting soon.
It's actually never.
All right, everybody, we're gonna get started here. Oh, did someone say anything online?
And that's like equal justice.
Electric bells.
Like a Malcolm Jarvis, grades, food,
All right, y'all, should we do the thing?
this is all
All right, John.
Okay, Nicole's online. Hey, Nicole. How's it going? All right, y'all, should we dive in? Hopefully more folks trickle in here, but we'll see what happens with all of that. So the appointment goes out to 2 o'clock today, but I really think we're gonna get done much earlier than that. That's like the maximum time. I'm trying to get out of here by noon, but it's up to y'all, and take all the time that you need up to 2 o'clock. After that, then I'll have to figure it out.
I did nothing yet.
Yeah. So thanks for being here, y'all. So this should be our last meeting for the Anti-Displacement Working Group. Big round of applause for everybody getting here. Yeah, it's dope. We have a very simple agenda for today. We're really just focusing on affirming the recommendations that we have laid out at the last meeting. The big hope is that everybody feels heard and that we sort of have laid out a good body of recommendations, both locally and for sort of the regional context as well too. So there should be a body of materials on the table over there. For the folks online, I'll share that with y'all in just a second too, so you can have all that as well. Really that's what we're here to do today, just sort of affirm the recommendations. Maybe you guys seeing everything written out in a way might help you think about that there should be more there, or that you just have the right things there, and that's good too. So that's really yep.
So just, I mean, there may need to be a part 2 to this. I mean, a lot of staff. We're not gonna necessarily be affirming recommendations. We want
right.
From the working group. So
Right.
we have KB, we have Copeland, we have Ricardo, and we have Carla here.
Right.
Nicole on the phone, great, but
We need more, yeah.
we may want to devise some methodology to electronically or
Right.
via computer, get some affirmations from other working
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, for sure.
So that it's
Yeah.
pulled together. I mean, I let you guys decide how that
Yeah.
might work best, but
Yeah, I think that sounds right. It'd certainly be something I think that would be virtual or electronic. I don't really envision hosting another Saturday meeting. I know these are tough for everybody, but I think that's right, for sure. Yeah, and we'll see what the attendance looks like overall for today. So for the agendas today, so we did sort of the introductions and groundings. What I want to do is, and we're in kind of a small group, right? We don't have a lot of folks here today, so maybe we'll have to think about this a little bit. But the hope is at least to go into the localities like we did last 2 Saturdays ago to sort of look at the recommendations. What I did, if you see in the notes, and again, for the folks online, I'll share this with you in just a second. I basically just took down all the notes and I put it into sort of a document that was hopefully legible for y'all for the purposes of here today. As we talked about last week, right, the recommendations are more complex than just the information that we talked about, we're talking about today, right? We're gonna get into sort of the legal considerations, cost, implementation strategies and all these different sort of things. My sort of temperature checking, y'all, is that there's not necessarily need to go into all those details here today, like for us to sort of affirm all those details. That takes a lot of horsepower for sure. Like we said, we want to share all that information out, of course, before it's published, and that should be part of probably this virtual strategy as well too. But I think the important thing is, do we have the right outcomes that folks are hoping for? And do we have the right policies that we think will support those outcomes ultimately? And so that's really what we're going to focus on. So in those small groups, and again, I think we're going to have to sort of play around with that. We have a smaller group in here today. To affirm the outcomes and the supporting policies, and to some extent talk about prioritizing them, which I think might be hard given the small group that we are at today, but we'll talk a little bit about it. The Robbinsdale Crystal group, we talked about prioritizing last time, but the Brooklyn Park and Minneapolis didn't as much. That doesn't necessarily mean that some policies like are really only going to do the policies that are prioritized, right? We're just trying to get a sense of like what's the most important things to focus on and get done if there was some sort of choice to be made at some future time, right? And to be able to communicate that to whoever needs to hear this at the end of this. We'll come back into large groups and we'll be talking about basically everything together, basically to sort of look at what the localities are talking about. So we'll have some share and discussion of those local outcomes and supporting policies. Again, hopefully the supporting documents help folks see everything. And I think this is important because 2 weeks ago, what did you say? There you go. Got your crew here. Last time, folks, I think y'all all kind of generally talked about some very similar themes, but some groups went into more detail than other groups did. For example, within the Robbinsdale Crystal group, they kind of talked into detail what types of small business grants were the most interesting, whereas in the Minneapolis and the Brooklyn Park group, they sort of said small business grants, right? And so maybe some of this more detail that other groups got might be more affirming and more what we want to communicate, or it might not. But just having the opportunity to see those things. We talked about the last very briefly, sort of quarter-wide outcomes and supporting policies. Not as much in there, which I think is okay. Sorry, y'all. And, but we're gonna sort of talk about that again today, hopefully with folks. Again, it was at the end of the last meeting, and so I think there's not a lot of energy in the room for that, and so just kind of come back around into affirming those quarter-wide policies. Then the hope was to affirm those recommendations overall together. Again, we'll sort of have to make that judgment call whether we have enough people in the room. Folks are still trickling in, but if we have enough people in the room to do that today, or if that's something that we need to do electronically, especially given that some people operate differently, right? Some people can sort of operate on the spot and they might have all that they need to know today to do that. And some folks might need, let me get a chance to read this and let me send it to you electronically over. And I'm open to whatever that looks like as a whole. And then, yeah, hopefully some sort of celebrating that this is, we're towards the end of our process here. But we'll talk about next steps. Of course, there will be next steps given all of this. Any questions about the agenda for today? So quite simple, hopefully, but with a couple different parts of it. Does this feel right for y'all for the conversation? So kind of just picking up from the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. Good.
I guess I see here some like money talk, like grants or loans, but in the feasibility study that y'all conducted, grants. Are we gonna talk about like a package per se, like how much money will it cost to do like all this, is there like a dollar amount or anything like that we can kind of like also understand as part of the solution, like that investment aspect of it, or?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, two parts to your question. I think one part, this is giving us a chance to sort of clarify and deepen the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. So again, some folks just said small business grants, some people gave more particular grants. And so it's a chance to sort of like, okay, we see it here today. What are the type of grants, maybe if we want to get more specific, or if we want to, or for any of the other policies for that matter. I don't necessarily think that y'all can or need to decide how much money's in here. I think you should sort of clarify what your intentions in that, and we can sort of build in the background. Like, so say for example, we need small business grants to every small business along the corridor. Okay, we did a quarter-wide business windshield survey, so we can get a sense of like, if you wanted to estimate that in the whole corridor, we probably equipped with the information to sort of do that. So you can just sort of pass along the intention, and we can clarify that, and then of course, then you can share that later to make sure that it's right. But I don't think you need to overly put pressure on yourself to figure out the cost definitively today. I think that's hard to do from your seat, but if you can, if you want to, I'm not, of course, precluding that from happening. So if that makes sense. Any other questions today? Okay. Welcome, Diane. Okay. So let's dive in. I wanted to do a little bit of sort of reporting out from a broad perspective, because I think it will help for y'all when you get into the small groups, about outcomes and policy recommendations that they've been talked about up to this point. So namely what happened last week, but I think I'm also taking and drawing from what's been talked about in this room over the course of our year together. Just to sort of talk about some common themes. Generally, each locality, all of you are sort of talking about something very similar. I think oftentimes you could be using different language, minorly different language, and sort of what I reported back in these documents sort of points towards you speaking very similarly, but I just used your raw language at you so that you can recognize it for today. Ultimately, we want to sort of be able to generalize that language in some sense, just so that we can consistently communicate the things that you're saying. So right, small business grants, you might say that in 3 different ways, depending on the group that we're getting to, but we want to be able to communicate it similarly. At the same time, we don't want to lose any nuance that is unique to each geography, the politics, the resources, those different sort of things too. So we're going to try to get to nuance, but also try to get to shared language in a way too. And so that's somewhat what I'm trying to communicate in this at the very beginning. Some very common, some basic themes that I think are coming out within all of your groups, again, in slightly different ways, are housing outcomes, small business support and workforce outcomes, land and environmental justice outcomes, reparative racial justice outcomes, and then sort of this category that I'm calling cultural and community outcomes as well too. And I'll sort of talk a little bit about what each of those are coming out of. So for example, in housing outcomes, kind of all of you are generally talking about in some ways protecting the people in the corridor from displacement. Again, you're sort of the nuances and the outcomes might be a little bit different across the different localities, but this is generally a theme that's quite consistent amongst folks in this group. Keeping housing affordable and preserving NOAA housing is something that I think each of the 3 groups are sort of noting as very important outcomes. Supporting renters becoming homeowners, so this idea about transitioning from renting to owning, again, in some slightly different ways across the corridor, are also coming out as common themes as well too. And prioritizing developing more affordable housing in station areas. Something that I think each of you are talking about. Some of the nuance for those might be developing public housing. Some might say like generally affordable housing. Again, there's nuance depending on the locality that we're talking about, but as a general theme is quite consistent across this group. This is a major theme coming out from this group. Within small business support and workforce outcomes, again, something that's quite consistent across the different groups and folks that are in this room. Things like prioritizing small local businesses, transition from renting to owning. So again, that idea of part of what gives folks the most agency, ability to sort of control their destiny is this aspect of owning both land and property, sometimes together. Preserving and developing affordable commercial spaces for rent, technical and financial support for businesses. Again, there's sort of different types across each group. Preserving unique culture and places by supporting small businesses owned by BIPOC individuals. So sort of recognizing this role that businesses play a role in like making a community the place that feels like home to them. Improving the climate for small businesses generally, right? So it's not just keeping them in place, but what ultimately allows them to thrive in the long term is important. And ensuring the workforce that delivers the Blue Line Extension primarily comes from the Blue Line Extension corridor communities, something else that's coming up quite consistently. Within land and environmental justice, sort of these outcomes of developing land disposition policies that address unique possibilities and desired anti-displacement outcomes. Again, something that's been sort of talked about generally. Again, I don't think you necessarily need to know all the details of the policies that sort of point towards these outcomes, but I think understanding the outcomes gives sort of a North Star to the actual policies themselves. More community control over vacant lots, or I should say underutilized lots or parcels or buildings as well too. Maximizing public spaces along the corridor, ensuring better infrastructure post Blue Line Extension construction. So not just returning it back to its existing conditions, but what is sort of the conditions of thriving in the long term, and sometimes that shows up in the context of hard infrastructure as well too. And then within reparative racial justice outcomes, sort of themes of repairing harm already done to communities due to previous iterations of Blue Line planning, prioritizing residents and small businesses that are already living in the corridor, providing accessible grants to small businesses in the corridor, developing more community control and involvement in implementation, supporting organizing in the corridor to hold institutions accountable to these outcomes. All big themes are pretty strong in most of the groups. And then within culture and community outcomes, ensuring the diversity of the corridor thrives in the long term, making the blue line accessible to all by prioritizing those that are most vulnerable to displacement, ensuring that the policies are accessible to all regardless of immigration status or any other status, supporting the diversity of small businesses, community to thrive, and making the blue line experience fun. One thing I just want to say why I'm focusing a lot on outcomes, because again, as I sort of talked about at the beginning of this process, there's a lot of policies that can lead to these outcomes. Y'all, of course, went on to describe which policies you think are the most important ways of getting us to those policies, but the truth is that there's a lot of things that could be done. I think one of the important things to communicate to policymakers or whoever receives these recommendations themselves is to sort of start with the idea of like, what's our North Star in delivering anti-displacement in the community, right? And I think it starts with these outcomes. So I really, in my mind, probably what's first and foremost for me is like, do we feel the most clear about the outcomes that we want to get to, right? And then we can sort of talk about, of course, about the policies that we think are really important, and without needing to know all the different nuances. Again, there's a lot of iterations of each of those policies themselves. And I think we need to hold ourselves accountable today to getting like the right math or the right logic to delivering the outcome, but it's knowing ultimately what we're trying to get to, right? And so hopefully in some ways that sort of, I don't know, makes it easier in the sense of the conversation that we had today, but also knowing that our group, this project, is going to try to build in as much nuance as possible too, right? And so that's where the sort of the policy briefs themselves that we're attaching to them. I shared those out at the last meeting. If y'all need another copy of those, I can share those too. So we're gonna try to do the exact same. Oh, did someone say something? Oh.
Yeah. Could I have somebody put these in the chat for me? For us, I'm not sure who else is on the Zoom.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. And just 1 second, Nicole, I can share this whole presentation in the PDF too, so I can do that. Just 1 second.
Thank you.
Yes.
Seems like they also might not have the supportive doc, this one here.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, I have all those too. Yeah, for sure. I should have did that before I started the presentation.
Thanks.
But yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for that. So maybe in your small, so what we're gonna do, I think we have enough people to split into small groups. We have at least I think we can have a Minneapolis group. And I'm thinking though that maybe all the suburban constituents, y'all can meet in one small group too. Does that make sense? Or do you want to do, because I'm just looking at Brooklyn Park. We've got Kim, no, Victoria is here.
I also live in Brooklyn Park, but represents Minneapolis.
Right. And then we have Diane here too, right? So I'm thinking, is it okay if we go into suburban small groups and then city small group? Is that okay? Okay. So I hope these, and you have a copy of this presentation to see these themes and help them come up too. Again, if we need to add more nuance, that's what the purpose of the small groups are supposed to be, or it's just affirming that we have the right things there as well too. So, and then the second aspect of it being prioritizing, trying to attempt to prioritize, not in sort of like a 1 through 10, but like, what's your top 5? That sort of aim of the conversation. So what we'll do is we will have, since Nicole is online, we'll have the Minneapolis group in here. And for the suburban group, we can either go downstairs into the same place that we were 2 weeks ago, or we can just go into the atrium, whatever y'all feel more comfortable with. And we'll split that way.
Can we just divide the room?
Or we could just divide the room. I would say the difficulty that is with, like, when Nicole will hear everything.
Oh.
And so then it'll be harder for the participation online. That's fair. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So I think maybe I recommend that we at least split into 2 different.
Atrium, what atrium?
Atrium?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so I will let y'all grab some snacks, grab all the papers that you need, and then we'll split into the small groups. So I guess Minneapolis folks stay here, and suburban folks, I'll see y'all in the atrium shortly. Sound good? And Nicole, I'm going to share with you all these materials right now.
Yeah, that one's not gonna be.
for folks on YouTube, you can also see this on the Blue Line EXT website to get all the same materials.
Yeah. And when you taught it too.
So you go into the atrium trying to progress far away from the hub reform.
Okay. Okay. Did they say that?
No, I just wanna, I just want you to get, you know.
If you guys wanted, we could open the room right next door.
Oh.
186.
186.
Oh,
That's the one.
let's do that. Do you want to grab the folks outside real quick?
Yeah.
And I'll.
But I think that it's easier for people to orient themselves to things that are No, I think there's some really good ones.
Good morning. How are you? Yeah.
But I'm wondering, they'll focus on just on the organization, small business.
Well, that's what we need to go. So nothing. I didn't add anything to what anybody did or didn't say. So I think we need to add that today. Yeah, for sure.
And he like rolls down and it's like,
Yeah. Right here. Yeah. I mean, if you want to sit in a smaller group, you can. It's up to you. I'll leave it up to you. For sure. Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. A personal.
Hey, how are you?
So the microphone should be able to pick up anything for online.
I'm in the radio.
Oh,
So
of course, anytime.
Wow.
So,
Do you have a gas?
yeah.
I forgot to run the gas, so that's why
Yeah. I mean,
No gymnastics today.
It's over finally.
Something you can investigate in.
I was excited to.
yeah, that's fine.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I still. Charles.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's about 6 of them.
When it's like, oh, so, get up at 5 to, yeah. We have an electric snowblower, I really like it.
I guess the only thing is
I got a vacation plan on 20.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you're fine. Take your time.
One of the first resources yeah.
So, anyway, okay, cool. Shall we?
So,
Hey, what's up? How are you?
The cookie.
They can get to.
so yeah, I will want to look in Portugal, but if you want to
So are we closing out?
Friday. I feel like we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can both get whatever and then just get it going.
I always remember a face.
And then she'll
really bad.
kind of describe on your company name so that we can sort of relate things to each other. Okay. I will describe this now that we're
And then feel free to
Our interfaces.
Yeah.
jump in wherever,
For sure.
so.
Sounds good.
When you go Can you hear me?
It's hard to hear. Is that my face on my big screen?
You are, she is on the big screen.
Try talking to them.
It's the Nicole show.
Oh, no. Nobody needs that.
Can you hear me better through here? I'm sure the room can just hear me better,
Here,
Taking this through all the.
a lot of background noise.
but. Sure, yeah, I'll take wireless, why not?
Helps them prepare and drive before else maybe after they can be late.
As long as it's people knows city planning versus coordinated, they merged it with MC.
But I mean, we can't talk about pre if we don't have nowhere to go.
So is that what you would do?
I mean, that has to be first.
Yeah, when I graduated, I went to South in Indiana.
You know, we can't ignore that conversation. That conversation has to come before any other conversation about smart business.
That's my first job.
And that's actually a little bit more important.
Testing 1, 2.
You're moving your entire.
Right, thank you.
Literally, it's gonna cut down your. That's gonna cut down your. Customer.
200,000
Okay.
in the 60s.
Customers, they're used to going to one.
Okay, appreciate that. Good to see you.
6 months
Like
to,
what happened
6
in
months to a
Detroit.
year.
Yeah,
All right, Nicole, can you hear me now?
a lot of my work was.
Yep.
You know.
Okay, great, good.
You gotta have that conversation first.
You know,
Like a mass exodus.
Okay, I'm gonna get us started. Just waiting for wireless. So, and I appreciate the conversation you all were having, because I think the place we wanna start right now is what's missing. Because I think we had a really robust discussion last time we were here downstairs, but there's a few things in there. Number one, when we look at some of the things that are on the list, and I appreciate the way that C. Terrence broke everything up into columns and those buckets, we are now thinking about, because sometimes when it comes to me and Margaret, we're just checking in about this, so we're facilitating this part. So sometimes when it comes to getting down to the sort of the brass tacks of investments versus rights, and while it's said within the document, I think you can also go into we can have a finer discussion about things that are missing and things that we want to carry forward. So I'm going to start right now by saying, number one, let's do 5 minutes to look through the materials that you all have before you in the different columns. And then let's kind of talk about like what's missing, what do we want to have a little bit of a finer grain discussion about. Because I know the documents are just, they're kind of new and fresh right now this morning. So let's take about 5 minutes. And Nicole, if you, I know you stepped away, or maybe you're just got your screen off, but we're just taking 5 minutes to look at the, I know you said that you just recently got the attachments, so just take a look at those and we're gonna go in a little bit deeper on some of that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Malik.
You're good? Okay. Let me know if you can hear me.
Malik,
Yeah.
do you want me to take notes?
Sure, that's Margaret's taking notes, but if you want to take notes in Zoom land as well, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
She's staff.
How do you pronounce her last name?
Hey Lee,
Yes.
how do you pronounce your last name?
Gagazian.
All right. That's cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick side note, I don't mean to interrupt your processing, but if there are things that were not captured fully in those raw notes, feel free to add on as well. Like just write it on your document or let's put it into the room. Give about 2 more minutes. And wait for Candy to get settled.
Morning, Candy.
Good morning. I slept, man. But thank you for having me.
Well, you did better than I did. I got dug in by the city of St. Paul, so. Yeah, that's a whole nother community meeting right there.
Yeah.
Last snowfall, I just forgot that my neighborhood existed.
Well, my council member loves me, so I'm sure that, I don't want to go there. Oh, 2 more minutes.
Are we voting on it?
Yeah, so Candy, thanks for that, thanks for that kind of side question. So I just want to remind folks that we are affirming outcomes today, and we're supporting policies today, the things that we came up with and going in finer. This is obviously, it's a 10 to 2 meeting today, so we thought we'd kind of get that done in 10 to 2 and then get folks back out. But to also know this is not the final stop, right? Like, this is not like we're gonna vote, that's it, we're done. Like, no, we affirming, supporting. That's what we're doing today. Yep. Give about 1 more minute online. Zoom land. And then after that minute's done, we just come right out the gate. We'll start with KP because of the discussion you were just having a few minutes ago about having places to go. I think we should. Let's start right there.
It's the same thing we've been having.
Yep.
It's the same conversation I've been having.
Yep.
From the cake.
Yep.
Like, I'm sick of being on this horse.
Yeah. Yep.
When I think, and I was listening in and picked up some of the conversation in the notes as well too, and I think that, I'm just gonna say, like, in general, I think there's like the point people are trying to make, and then the notes from the conversations are sort of like around the point, but not the point, right? Which was, during construction, businesses need a place to be.
Right.
No, before.
Before, well, yeah, before, during, and then figuring out what the pathway is after.
I mean, you can't have a discussion about how to support businesses construction, during, or after, until you have a conversation about where they're gonna be. Because if they're not somewhere, then their business is done. So it's a mute conversation. If they have nowhere to go.
Well, I think we can discuss some of that during the pre area and make it broader.
Define pre.
And broader, by the way.
There has to be a definition on pre. Well, because pre can mean 2 weeks before.
Well, pre this is all part of the discussion now. Putting the language in place into policy to ensure that certain things happen and that businesses are not at risk. So we have to put the right language in place to ensure that we have some backing just in case if things don't get done the right way. That's the part that I'm more concerned about, is that we have leverage on the back end in policy to ensure small businesses don't get hurt. And that's when we're concerned about the pre-work and then broadening that conversation, making language that we ensure that these small businesses are taken care of.
Now, for me, pre was 2 months ago.
I appreciate you saying that.
As a business owner, pre was 2 months ago.
Okay.
Because you're asking small business owners who spend most of their time planning on how to keep our businesses afloat and moving forward, You're asking for us to wait till the last second to make a business decision. And when you have $200,000-$300,000 worth of equipment, moving it at the last second is not something that you can do.
Right.
But you also start to lose during that time period when you have to move your equipment because you gotta shut it down, you gotta get it together, that takes about a week. That means that you have no business coming in for a week. And when people call you for things, if you don't answer your phone, they call the next person on their list. And usually that's where they stay. So that means you lose a whole heap of business.
Yes, you do, and they don't
Because
come
you're,
back either.
yeah,
Right.
you're at the last second because that's how government works. I don't care how government works. I'm responsible for my business, the community that I serve, and the people that I employ. So I need to have plans set in place a year ahead of time to make sure that my business does not fold.
Yeah.
So I can't wait till the last second. So again, my pre was 2 months ago.
You need to know.
We have to know. It's not that we want to know, we have to know.
Yeah, it's like you need
And if
to
we
know.
don't know, we have to start figuring out a means, whether it's moving to another city, but we have to have some type of stability for our business. And that was, like I said, that was 2-3 months ago.
Well, then if you even move to another city too, your entire customer base is from that area. So you have to try to build a whole brand new business all from scratch again.
I have a question, because I remember you talking about sort of that idea of businesses planning really right now for 5 years out, 3 years out, really trying to do that longer term planning. One question I have, at its most, if everything goes at its fastest, when would construction actually start on the Blue Line extension?
2026, right?
2026.
Okay, so 2026, let's speak from development, right? If I wanted to develop a property on Broadway, if I wanted to start Monday, I'm looking at 18 months.
Right.
Minimum before that project is remotely done.
Well, and
Say that again.
you've never developed anything before.
If you're looking at least 18 months before that project before the project that.
Or more,
Or more.
because you are, let's face
I'm
it,
saying a
a
minimum.
black man on the north side with a small business that has never developed anything before.
So
So
we're
it's going
talking
to
about
take
2
some
years.
time.
So Christelle took to the construction of
Planning.
something, I mean, the time KP's talking about is getting plans in order, figuring out, you know.
I know
talking about the
people
whole-
that have been working on something for 5 years
Sure.
because of
Yeah, I'm
getting
talking
the
about the whole
financing
gamut.
together.
Sure, and then that just starting, maybe you're moving into a building that's there, so there's always gonna be some construction, right? Remodeling or construction or whatever it might be.
Well, the mere fact
You
that
gotta
most of.
acquire the land.
Yeah,
Oh,
There's no land available.
Right.
So you've got some public properties available, but then you have a whole bunch of land that's being sat on by absentee landlords
Yeah,
that
yeah.
think they're gonna get a cash cow soon. And no one's being honest with them about the fair market value that they're gonna be offered. So now they're charging $900,000 for a building that's falling apart right now. So honestly, I think what also would be great is if people were honest about what that fair market value was right now up front, so that some of these people can start releasing these buildings to people that wanna purchase them now. Because there's nothing available. He has to find a piece of land first.
right, and yeah, interesting. I'm interested in that because people are sitting on property because they think, well, I guess anybody can think what they want about what it's worth, but if it's a piece of property that's gonna be acquired publicly by the government, by the project.
There's only a small handful of those.
Yeah.
I'm talking about one in particular that owns like a whole block worth of property that has perfect retail storefront options, but they are sitting on it and not doing anything for over a decade, maybe even a couple decades.
And what
And
do you-
did this and also was able to become pretty well off after a project that happened on Lowry and Penn Avenue. So my thing is like, there's just nothing if KB or to try to get a place to relocate right now. Mind you, he doesn't even own the building he's in. You know, and then he's got the debt to income ratio issue, we got credit issues, not trying to put you on blast or anything like that.
Hey,
But that's the reality of most people, including me, and why I don't own a building on West Broadway. You know, but he has to spend time getting his credit right, paying off some debt, finding people that are willing to even invest in his idea or project, acquire land, and da 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 da. That is for him, that ain't 2, that's 3 years out. And now he's just, and he's way more well-positioned than the majority of the businesses on Broadway. I'm talking to 28 businesses right now, and the majority of them will not, it's not gonna happen unless somebody's willing to give them a property for $1, or people are willing to be honest to the people who are sitting on that private land and say, you know what, you're only going to get this much, so that they start releasing that land.
So that's why I'm saying
How do we do that?
I'm saying that you have to have that conversation about where they're gonna go right now, because we're talking about 2-3 years out before we can have anywhere to go. And you can't talk about the redeveloping any buildings on Broadway, because the biggest thing with the buildings on Broadway is the buildings on Broadway have been ignored for so long, they're terrible.
But KB, how does that relate to people that may have a business, but ultimately their desire is to stay where they are?
What if the building gets tore down?
That's different. Because then obviously that's not a choice.
And then also,
But there are
if they
also,
wanna stay where they're at, and the building doesn't get tore down, but they have 0 parking, how are they gonna stay there?
right, so then that,
And they don't have the money to build a parking lot underground, or can't build a parking lot on Broadway, so they can't purchase the building behind them and tear down a person's house, you know, like.
Cause I'm working with a business right now that they own their building. They don't own the parking lot behind their building. And their insurance company won't process any more claims because their car's been hit so many times in the front. So they don't have anywhere to park. And that's right now. You know, so.
Well, when Bassett Creek Valley when the discussions and some of the preliminary discussions were happening over in Harrison in the 90s, there were businesses, these were just the discussions and some of the plannings and that master plan that came out. But the businesses along Glenwood Avenue and surrounding were already dealing with revenue impacts. And that was just a planning discussion, right? So and I wasn't even over in Harrison until 2004. And those businesses, International's Market Square, West Side, East Side of Glenwood, were already talking about revenue impacts. And that was just a discussion about a plan. And Ryan was like just getting at the table. But that alone, and then Nicole has talked many times about what happened with the first planning decisions around the first bout of planning, but still Harrison is experiencing the impact. So we really are talking about, and I appreciate you bringing this up and actually staying on top of this, is that it's yesterday and 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Maybe even thinking about the fact of thinking about some of the previous development in Harrison. When that first planning in Botno did not happen, some of these proactive policies should have been in place as we were moving on to the next planning discussion with whatever the next route alignment should have been.
And can we write a recommendation about parking and accessibility?
We can, I mean,
Because,
have forth, please.
Can we get a really cool shuttle trolley from a parking lot? 'Cause, you know, I love me a casino, and guess what they do? I park my car like 3 miles away, and they these are the shuttle me right up to the door.
Noted.
I was so
It's
mad when
still going to be an issue. When I'm looking between Capri and Penn Avenue, I just don't see how it's going to work. You know, we're talking about a gym, Black-owned gym, a Black-owned chiropractic, a Black-owned home health care, all in a row. How is a Metro Mobility van gonna drop off people in the front when there's only one lane? Like, how is this gonna how is that gonna work? And during the construction, when people need that health, they need that care, they're going to have to go somewhere else and they will not be coming back. This woman, she made it through a pandemic.
I I think what Crystal is saying, we need some honest conversation. We need
We
some
need
honest
to know
answers
what a
from-
dollar amount is to redevelop the entire West Broadway. We need to know that dollar amount. We need to talk to each person, each business individually and ask them, how much would it cost to redevelop your property with the parking that you need in order to be able to sustain this development? And if you can't come up with that dollar amount, we shouldn't even be having this conversation.
There you go.
Dan, I have a quick question. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Owen. A quick question. When we start the construction, it'll probably be done in phases, if I'm not mistaken, right? It won't be.
In some way,
It
shape,
won't be like,
yeah.
you're gonna rip up, just say Broadway, if that's a proposed route, you wouldn't rip up, you wouldn't start the whole line all at once.
We can direct the contractor however we want, to write a specification to direct the contractor how much they can tear up at any one time. On University Avenue, we did not allow them just to take all of University Avenue at one time.
Okay, that's all I wanted to just kind of clarify a little bit.
But what's happening is if you're doing block by block, what happens when you're in the middle?
There's
You know,
times when
people aren't gonna, you know, it's real, okay? And if you talk to the people that went through it on university, yes, they did do a lot of communication. There was teams of people that were working for the community to ensure that they knew what was happening. But at the same time, you're in a situation where you can't walk into your front door at all. It's not happening. And even if it's happening the block up, people aren't gonna go around and come to you somehow when there's no access at all. And now mind you, look at between Penn Avenue and the Capri. What are the alley situation there? How can people enter the back of those buildings? It's not happening. It's not gonna work.
I'm not even gonna ask nobody to park in the back of my building. I got my windows busted out.
Well, and University Avenue just had better access in that as well, too. Like, there were more through lines than good chunks of Broadway.
But isn't that a policy recommendation that we have to take a hold of? I mean, especially accesses to buildings or creating a doorway, or if the road is straight, they curb it, and we can do that. So I don't see it as a,
And during construction,
right?
well, also during construction, we also talked about some other alternatives. Some of them would work and some of them don't. Temporary relocation works for some businesses, temporary relocation doesn't work for.
Can we get helicopter rides?
That's
$10,000 a ride?
There may not be a get in from the top. I mean, so there are different things. I mean, but Christelle's right. I mean, you talk about saying, let's just use the block from Oregon to Penn, or from Logan to Penn, or that area, right, from Capri. I mean, it's tight, right? You're assuming that part of doing any kind of construction is gonna be to relocate and to upgrade some of the utilities as well. So you're digging up a road and you're putting in utilities as well. So there's gonna be times when it's gonna be difficult. Do you wanna keep the road open? If you wanna keep the road open while you're doing construction, it can be done. It just takes double the time. You gotta do half at a time and then do half at a time. We did different things where business owners came and said, we would rather you close this intersection for 2 weeks and be done than do one quarter, and let it take 2 months.
But you have to also keep in mind, Dan, that businesses like businesses up and down Broadway, we also rely on UPS and FedEx.
No doubt.
Like,
You still
they have to have somewhere to park their vehicles and deliver stuff to us.
So 2 questions. One, so you talk about talking to the businesses and them saying, look, if they would prefer the street closed or not. How does that process happen? Like, are the businesses along Broadway going to be talked to individually to figure out what's going to be best for them? Or is this sort of, we broadly believe, first of all? Second of all, wondering as well too, just to put a little context on this, like, I see Southwest and the project costs like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. right? This sounds like something that's a project cost, right? These are direct impacts of the light rail development. Is the cost of relocating businesses, of talking to people, of mitigating, is that going to be wrapped into the project cost of the blue line? Or is this a sort of like a, well, this will also happen? Because I keep thinking about like the failure to do that on University Avenue being something that the Met Council got sued about because they weren't addressing the direct impacts on businesses in the environmental impact statement.
The things that are involved with access and business impacts during construction are project eligible costs. They will be things that will be built into the project. So those kind of policies that can come out of this can be addressed as part of the project cost.
And then I guess my next question is, and here I'm looking to the business owners, like, what does that cost? Like, how much
Oh, God.
would
I
it
mean,
really take?
I'm
if
28
you
in.
actually want to
I'm 28
address
properties
this
in right
issue
now.
fully?
And it's a lot of money. It's going to be, if you were to repair and get people back to where they need to be, it's going to be more than the Southwest situation.
Which is how much?
You're billions of dollars over right now? Just one project right now that I'm looking at is like a $20 million project, just one on Broadway. So I'm just.
To support
like,
them during
but
construction?
So what I'm saying is it's clear that the conversations are not actually happening right now. It's clear. It's clear that you have not sat down with each individual business and had an extensive conversation about what their needs are.
During
It's
construction?
very clear about everything. About everything.
I think we keep saying during construction.
Reparations is what I'm talking about,
Again,
repair.
We're talking around the carrot. The carrot is having somewhere to be first.
And a functional business afterwards.
Yeah, like if we don't have discussion about where businesses are gonna be, everything else is irrelevant.
So can I just say one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I feel like maybe is obvious, but I'm saying it just for myself, is that I think what's happening here is that that very important points are being elevated.
Yep.
That don't necessarily sit in opposition to the work that needs to happen here, but that feels like if we leave here today and have our 5 top little things that we were told to do in this session right now, that it somehow affirms that this is the path and negates the work that needs to happen that's being talked about here, right? That somehow these people are gonna leave this room and we said yes to these 5 things, so we're all good. And at the end of the day, none of the folks here who don't live on the north side need to talk and be in community and be accountable to this in the same ways that KB, that Christelle and others are gonna be accountable.
Because I'm reading through this, I don't see any dollar amounts. Like, I don't see any what is the cost for this project?
Right.
What is this gonna cost the community? I don't see any dollar amounts. I can't say yes to this when we don't even, we got $100 billion for organizing to defend community benefit. What? What is the cost? That's what I wanna know, because that's the only dollar amount I see in this document.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to add to the overall investment during and post is maybe an investment to help businesses pivot their business. Sometimes businesses have to have if they're going to be under construction and lose business, we got to help them streamline to pivot their business, maybe more on the digital side, the training side, all that stuff. So all that investment needs to be also included on the front end as well as the back end during construction.
What does that investment look like from your vision?
Well, I'm just thinking about a business.
I mean, there's so many of them on Broadway that I think people don't even recognize, and they don't live on Broadway and actually purchase those services that are in this room and that are making decisions on this process. You know, like, I mean, I get what you're saying, like, that will help some people, but there is the nail, you're gonna tell the nail shop that digitally do nail?
No, I'm not
Because
saying
that's-
that, but
and that's
those
only
dollars
fixing
can
it.
be used also to help promote their business in other ways.
Yeah.
So if it's not, if they're gonna lose business, then let's help on the front end to make sure they have enough investment to acquire a new customer, whatever that means. And then I'm saying, if it takes that investment, or that they can use those dollars to help market, whatever it is on their business, then that's an investment that they lose customers. And so that's what I'm saying on the digital side. I think it's plus enough digital or social media, whatever they're gonna use to get them more in the business.
That's something that needs to happen anyway. My question is, what does that look like? Because who's gonna teach that? Like,
Not much.
How much?
I don't know if it's gonna cost.
How much? Who's gonna actually teach
You can find anyone to do any of this stuff if you have the money to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the cost is gonna be for that.
Do we have enough information now, you know, for that? I mean, even to estimate.
You can't, because I thought I could until I went into each one and started talking to each one individually. And they were telling me things that I would never know, because I don't know their unique issues as that business. They all do their own thing. I mean, I didn't even know Kemp's had CO2 tanks underneath their building, and if there is civil unrest, if they would have compromised the building, that it would have blown up the whole north side. I had no idea. Like, and that's my thing, it's like, you have to have the conversations with each individual business, or you're not gonna know. You don't know what their insurance needs. Because you don't know what things they're, what services they're providing and what goods they're providing. You know, it's the whole thing. It's not just.
So this is the, so this,
Lay it over there.
right, so this is the discussion that we needed to have today, right? Because as we've been talking, and of course, other people, please feel free to jump in here. Getting into the meeting. Everything in pink that we talked about that y'all came up with so far has been affirmed by this discussion. If you relook at the pink, which is the pre-construction area, these were all the things that we're talking about. The only thing that we're not, the only thing that is like, obviously the finer points that we're getting to, but also the only thing we're talking about is like now, the dollar amount. What's the dollar? That's the.
Not just the dollar amount. We need some honest answers from government.
Okay.
We need some serious honest answers. Because every time we ask a question, we don't get an answer. We get talk around the answer question. And we never get any solid answers.
Wait, just one thing I want to follow on first. So the $100 million. And by the way, I just want to quickly say, like, I think I've been doing this long enough where I can read a room. So it seems like people wanna, there are a couple of folks that I've kind of giving you side eyes, and it looks like you want to jump in, so feel free to jump in. But the $100 million was about capacity to keep this going, which is the organizing amount. I mean, that's, you know, that's some of the conversation that was happening on some of the call downs that I was doing. Because we recognize that these community benefits are lifted up and brought in, and we're having these discussions. We're gonna need capacity to keep this going. This isn't gonna stop after whatever happens to this anti-displacement work. We're gonna need more organizations, business consulting. We're gonna need a lot of things going on. So that's what that's about. But we can, more dollar amounts, honest answers, yes, please.
The feels the community that is moving really fast.
Okay.
And a lot of people that are in these engagement meetings or whatever you want to call them, they walk out feeling like they were helpless, and this is happening way faster than they can handle.
Yeah.
And so to be able to know that dollar amount now or a year ago would have been nice and will be nice.
Yeah.
So we can at least put an amount to it, you know, I mean.
Yeah, right, totally.
Well, that's why we appreciate the representation in this room, because we know we want to get that back to folks, but we also realize that there need to be some more one-to-one discussions, so.
Adjustable. Yeah. Nothing is, yeah, because, well, you know, inflation happens every year and, you know, the cost of goods and our environment is worse and worse. But wood is only gonna get more expensive. So.
Well, I would say that's way hot, like you don't get what you don't have demand. Like, it's not asking, it's requiring, the project needs. Quite frankly, like the thing that can make this project happen or not happen is, does the community feel like it's addressing the opposition? And I think that has a value, like how much does it cost essentially to buy rock?
And rebuild it.
And rebuild it.
I guess one thing I just want to say that I feel is coming up is, so we have a section on reparations, right? And I think right now, to me, what I'm hearing and what I saw happen even, let's say, with the civil unrest is happening is we're dealing with decades of disinvestment, underinvestment that have caused for organizations who are supposed to be anchors on the north side that would be the players ready to deal with some of these things, right? So the work that Christelle is talking about, what I'm reading in that from my like position in philanthropy is, okay, WDC, Neon, all the anchor institutions along Broadway and beyond need more staff, need tripled operational budgets, need platforms to store every single conversation that is still happening, need also, right, so it's reparations for the impacts that are going to happen to the broader community, but it's also reparations to the lack of investment that has been had in legacy organizations that should have been prepared to deal with this and that haven't because of failures in philanthropy, failures in government. And so I feel like that's what's showing up here too, is we're not prepared to even store information that then would inform strategies and budgets that then roll up into these policies. And so, you know, I don't know what to do about that because it's the past, you know, it is what it is now. And there's unfortunately, from my perspective, also a lot of danger in then growing organizations too quickly because they implode. So,
Yep.
I mean, so I just want to throw that out there that it's like the expectations that are being set around this table around what is doable within 3, 4, 5 years and what is being placed in terms of responsibility on community leaders is frankly, I don't know, it's not, it's set up to fail. And who's risking the most is a question I would, you know, I think we don't answer to. Thank you.
Something that maybe also from the other group is like something that I feel was helpful was talking about but yeah, all of this seems to be way up in the clouds, but like if we're talking about draft supplemental environmental impact study and a record of decision based on that study, it helps us like try to like focus on, okay, what can we put in that record of decision so it's funded by federal dollars and we can have some hope that the project is actually learning from all the work that we're doing about placement or impacts or anything, right? Because right now we haven't seen a dollar or we haven't seen a policy really reducing it working room, but yeah, so I don't know, like, so we have here like some policies or policies before, during, and after.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like, for the city of Minneapolis, where it's the biggest changes in the design, the biggest changes in the impacts, like, what is gonna leave on that record of decision that could give us hope that there is more to come under that
started, you know, so I don't know if that's like a dying question. But what from this list can we get there, you know, like, because we know that once it's in the record of decision, it's like legal, they have to do it. So rather than thinking about this like way up in the sky, like maybe it can happen here or there, like that we know like needs to happen. And they even have an auditor on payroll making sure that they meet all of these investigations and whatnot. So that's, I guess, something that I'd like to be already looked at almost before the train. What can we do now? What can we do later? What can we do actually? And that's the other really interesting thing as we're talking about nonprofits. Sophia Guinness of Granny Goran, you know, what we're talking about federal funding available directly to nonprofit organizations without intermediaries. And apparently the Biden-Harris administration just put out like $550 million for partnerships with like nonprofit institutions or something. So maybe an outcome of this process can be, how can we get help identifying what federal funding streams that nonprofit organizations can tap into to help with the implementation of the policy before, during, and after construction.
So I hear that, and the level of regulation around the federal resource, again, that's what I'm getting at in terms of BIPOC-led organizations have not been invested in and set up in such a way where they can take advantage of those federal dollars, because down your neck trying to figure out where's that money at, how you report it every month. Who has time to report on stuff every month or every month? That's like how most well, it's federal grant, local nonprofits don't go for it. So I'm with you, it's like, yeah, that money has to come down, but who is it coming down to? And then we gotta get in the whole conversation about the effectiveness of organizations that can actually.
But the fact that we even have to even do all this work for this work that we didn't ask for is bullshit. What I'm saying is that the people that are pushing this construction on us should be paying for every single dollar of everything we've done around this project, period.
And we have to also, you know, I'm sorry, and I sit on quite a few nonprofit boards, but my confidence in nonprofits in North Minneapolis is very minimal at best. I do not want to have a discussion about money coming through nonprofits, because it never makes it to the people that it's supposed to be. There's millions of dollars that come in North Minneapolis that never makes it to people like me.
It's locked up in nonprofits.
So the moment you start saying money's coming through nonprofits, our ears shut off, because we know that money's not gonna make it to us.
Appreciate it. Zoom land, if you can hear me, you want to chime in, feel free to jump on in for our discussion about affirming outcomes and supporting policies. Anyone there?
I'm here. I'm just still listening.
We can get cut off. All right, live.
I don't know if it's live.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's live, but.
It's been live.
It's on YouTube.
Or is it really live? I'm sorry.
No.
There's no bullshit live, that's fine. Did you, Jim, Dan? You guys wanna, I just wanna get folks that haven't said anything. I've got them, we can talk about it. Yes. Okay, let's just, yeah.
I guess I'm trying to reconfirm what is it that we need to be today. Like what, like, that's a question. What is it that we, what's the assignment?
Right, so the assignment is, and Margaret, feel free to jump in on this. So the assignment is that we come up with, in the different colors, we come up with pre, post, and during. We're affirming those outcomes. We're not voting. This isn't the end. We need dollar amounts. I appreciate that. And so, but taking the affirmations and taking the support, you know, we're obviously going to be doing more work on this and with this group, but that's what we're doing. We're actually affirming the direction that we're going in today. And right now seems like we've got a pretty good consensus in the room, unless I'm missing something. So that's where So we're leaving out affirming and then we're moving on to the next phase.
But one of the things I would love to hear from those people that haven't said anything.
Right, we're gonna be starting. Am I on point?
Yeah, it's to see, you know, what's missing, what needs to be emphasized, what do we need to talk more, what are the things that people talk around that we talk around? Yeah, let's make sure the votes are in there, and also, I do think anything that we can do to just set a dollar amount would be useful. And that doesn't, as a couple folks said, that doesn't need to be the final dollar amount, but to talk, like, what universe are we talking about? What is the big sort of like, if we really want this to happen, if folks want this to be done right, what does that take? And to not talk about it in terms of what we think could happen, being told no 1,000 times, but what does it really take to make it happen and make it happen in a way that is going to benefit communities where people do get the resources that are necessary. The work that needs to be done.
Yes, and I, just to say, I feel this sense of finality in the room, and this is still an ongoing process. We're not, great, $700 million, we're good, bye, like, no, we're, yes. Yeah.
We're talking about section. That goes one item that's on my mind. And the businesses that are not what are the promotion on access, time, respecting time.
Thank you. Terry, I interrupted you.
No, I just want to make sure that we get a consensus that we have not heard yet. No. So, for me, I'm really concerned about us having the other three things on that list, because I have five. Not understanding the very top two, be able to respect, but we've got to make sure we do it. Yeah. Great. All y'all government don't, I mean, there's something out. That's right here. To be truthful, what am I supposed to say? I mean, if you want me to be honest and real, I don't know what to say. I mean, we have to take this back. I mean, we're not in charge of anything. We're here at the community to listen and to understand. I guess what I would say, maybe I find this list. This is the final thing I take back. We're setting it so today. I find this list to be just, or I mean, there's just too much there, and I think for me it would be helpful to understand. I mean, this conversation has been really helpful. I think focusing on the construction impact and the creeds now, those are the types of things that I'm really trying to bring back the urgency of everything. So, but I'm sorry, I'm not articulating this and responding to your question well, but it's really hard for me to have this much stuff and have such a giant bureaucracy that give you all any answer that's useful or truthful. But I do think this group focusing on some of the stuff in bad things are very helpful and urgent. That's what we have been giving the leadership, and I will bring back to leadership again. And I think what else would be helpful to hear what people, do they still feel there's a positive to the LRT at all? And that's sort of the first step. That's a first step to me in the anti-displacement is if it's something that the community just doesn't feel like there's any benefits to, I think that's something that's important to do. And I realize this isn't all 70,000 people who live on the north side. I think that's one of the most honest conversations we've got.
But I also would say people will have all kinds of different views. Do want an LRT bill, don't want an LRT bill, don't want it right here, don't. fact of the matter is, the project, the LRT project, in my mind anyway, is at least right now, bring us into the school. And the project would let us have this honest conversation about, in a specific, what is the thing that's going to result in positive change on the north side in the suburban communities? There's a lot of things that can do that. That's at least getting us having this conversation. So the end result, if the end result is an improved business climate, an improved residential climate, and improved ability for people to have transportation options and to local, culturally keep what's in place today functioning and better, and to like the benefits that the life value can bring before the people that are there today, that at least we're having that conversation.
Hey, Dan, I think we having a conversation along the lines of what he said, that, and Chair, we need to have the top 5 things that we want taken back, to be addressed, like right away. Because honestly, as a business owner, lifetime resident of Minneapolis, I don't care either way about whether the blue line comes or doesn't. I can give a damn less, unless you tell me how it's going to benefit me, how it's going to affect my business, how it's going to affect, whether negatively or positively, my community. And if you don't have those 3 answers, I don't care whether it comes or goes. That's the problem. Everyone's putting people in these 2 boats. Either you're for it or you're against it. Most of us don't care. We want to know the benefits. We want to know the cons, and we want to know what you're going to do to make sure that we are whole. And until we have those answers, we don't give a damn whether it comes or goes. Like, that's a new conversation.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
One of the most frustrating things for me over the last year with doing this is at the end of the day, no one knows, there's no clear answer. The city doesn't really have to agree with what we're saying. Is that the most frustrating part is that we cannot identify clearly who's going to be the. And that it's not that hard to tax a dollar amount to make sure that these BIPOC businesses are well taken care of. We sit here and we go back and forth. The construction knows, okay, we got at least about 10 businesses here that's going to be recommended. We need to go and consult with them.
Be honest.
And then tell them specifically what it's going to take to make sure if it's going to take relocation, then we figure that out. We got one business here, and versus the impact of all 29 or 30 businesses on the corridor. That this is going to be the most impactful business. We need to make sure this business is whole and figure out how we can support the business on a front, and then not only support them, but make sure that this business thrives in the next 3 or 4 years after construction. Other than that, we're going to be sitting back here with the same conversation.
Yeah, because I understand with everything he said, the honesty that he put out there, we like that. We that's what we want to hear. So we don't want to.
Minnesota nice to
Yeah,
around the end.
we're done.
So we have got ready for the next, we've heard that message. We've given our team the direction to put together the plans, the various plans, 2 stations, 1 station, that identify absolutely which properties will have building acquisition on them. That is done, and that is ready now, along with Old 21st, Old West Broadway, 1 station, 2 stations, all of that.
Still around the fact that you were still planning on putting only 2 stops between Penn Avenue and Plymouth and Lindale, because that's an issue too.
We have drawing to 3 stations, we're drawing to 2, or however, whatever that like.
There needs to be more than 1 station between the Penn and Plymouth Station.
And we have now got that where we got it. So, and we've got the difference. No, it's brand new. This is all coming now. This is all, as we get ready for the upcoming meetings in the next several months. The businesses, the part that I want to be understanding is the businesses where there's a building and we're acquiring the property. That's a huge concern for those people, but it's also well identified in levels of acquisition, payment, and compensation, relocation costs. I worry more about the businesses that, as it's identified via real estate acquisition, there's not any property that you're buying. Because then that's a business that doesn't have, at least by real estate compensation, direct dollars paid to them, but is going to experience impact as a result of construction, as a result of parking, and as a result of this getting built. And that's where I mean, there's way more of those, Christelle, than buildings that are being acquired. And so when you talk about Dr. Watson's properties, well, right now, you see that drawing, you'll see there's no property being purchased. And so therefore, there isn't a direct compensation via a real estate act.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean there isn't an impact.
There's a massive impact.
There's a significant.
Talking about in one lane in front of her building.
So how do we deal with those? And what are the policies that we have in place that allows us to support those businesses before, during, and after construction? And those.
Every single business will be impacted.
There's no question. I agree.
Mr. Zoom people is on there.
Will be
Can you
impacted.
paste them in the chat room? They would say something.
Petition buildings. We talked to Kristen about this. There's widening that would go into those. Well, that's gonna result in, if that plan goes forward, appraisal, purchase of the building, payment to the juxta for the land, payment to juxta for the building impact, payment to juxta for relocation costs, and then whatever else on top of that. But if you're next door and you're not being acquired, how do you get money? That's where I think.
We just need to have a dollar amount in every single impact, so that everybody can be properly reimbursed for that impact.
Hold on, we gotta remember that there's, cause and effect. So even if the building is not directly being acquired, there are businesses with building owners that are selling their buildings. Whether it's to a new developer or they just want to.
Absolutely right, and that's a
And that's
a different kind of displacement.
There's also an indirect impact where the business complemented the other business. Destination places, when you're like a one that silos alone, people aren't coming from all over to come to that one business. There's so many.
These are all,
impacts.
and they're all real
You
impacts.
can't really measure by dollars either, unless you imagine what it would be.
I agree with $10 billion.
And I have no problem setting a dollar amount on it, but the problem is that you can think big, right, and have a big dollar amount, but it's still gotta be given how, where are we gonna get this funding from? Got a lot of opportunities, and then how are we gonna decide what level, what pieces for, like you say, putting a various, some kind of a various compensation amount on various kinds of impacts. Because I'll tell you right now, there's no history that I'm familiar with where businesses were compensated for loss of public parking in front of their.
Most people, there were times when going to black neighborhoods, and black neighborhoods can't.
That doesn't mean it can't happen. I'm just saying it's not. There's a lot of things here that I think we're gonna be
Why
doing.
there were times we were doing this, we should have done that, a long time ago, we did that, every single time.
One.
Can I, before I pass over to Margaret, I heard the Zoom room is back, so, or.
Zoom room, is there,
I'm sure you've been hearing the discussion. Is there anything you want to add to the discussion on affirming?
People hear me?
Sport policies.
I don't think, can people hear me?
And I know we just put that ask in the chat room too, so. Okay, I'm gonna pass them on to you.
I think Nicole was saying something.
Oh,
Say again, please.
I was just wondering if people can hear me okay?
either. And then also, if you can have them, if you can just put in the chat, ask if we can't hear them, see if they can put it in the chat too, and we'll just put it on, we'll get it into the record.
Sorry, 1 minute,
I
Nicole.
was gonna say, I think one of the things that's really, that's getting a little bit stuck in some ways is that there are so many things that, at least from the project standpoint, we don't know about, right? Like a lot of these sort of like unanswered questions, and we'll know in the future, but the impacts that are happening now and have to be planned for now. So I guess one of the things that is a little bit of a tension, and I don't know if other folks are feeling it, but like, it feels like simultaneously we're being told there's not enough information to know things, but like absolutely people know things now. And so, and both policies and financing, like a plan for it needs to be in place before bad things happen, right? Before people are displaced, before businesses are displaced, to allow people to do planning in longer term, to allow people to acquire property, to allow people to set things up. And I don't think that those kinds of investments can wait for absolute certainty about everything related to the project, because by the time there's absolute certainty, that the time frame narrows, property costs go up, and you lose all those opportunities then to have the community actually be able to like own and control itself.
I think if we learned anything from Harrison, we should have learned that bad things are already happening. Bad things started happening the moment you announced what the intention, what you were gonna do. Bad things started happening then. So we're not trying to stop bad things right now. We're trying to litigate the damage of those bad things.
Yeah, can people hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's exactly right, KB. And I think given that Harrison has still not been made whole for the damage that has been done to the Harrison community from the former proposed route, it's really hard, I think, to ask other people along the new route to trust that things are going to be okay. Because we still have not been, made whole in Harrison. We still have not received the things that we've been asking for years now. So it's difficult to ask folks to trust that, oh, things are going to be different this time around. Well, you still haven't addressed the harm caused by this project. It's the same project. It's just a different route.
Exactly.
So I think it's really difficult for folks, I think, in this room, who live on the north side or own businesses, to see what happened in Harrison and then to not expect like, well, it's already happening up here on West Broadway. And, how do you trust that these policies are going to prevent things from happening, or that the investments are going to be made when no action has been taken still to address the harm already caused?
Thank you. Just a quick time check. We're 10 minutes till lunch. Terry?
One last thing, and I think we also have to put down as important of overall impact is that we have to address and reorganize how we configure parking on that space. That has to be a huge investment, and we haven't spent enough time talking about the possibilities and what the solutions may be and all of that, because that's a critical piece. Regardless of where you go, it's how we're going to figure out parking. So what's that going to look like, and there's an impact dollar wise.
And the parking one area is one. I'll go back where Ricardo was talking about parking one. can be one that can be kind of built in to the environmental impact statement, because it's a mitigation to a impact caused by the project.
So we want to make sure that we attach a dollar amount to the impact, as far as, you know, not just improving parking, but what's that cost gonna do for business owners, and a dollar amount.
Right.
I think I want to add maybe to the point, what's your name again?
Margaret.
Margaret, that Margaret was making around sort of timing and those pieces is, you know, like from NFG standpoint, right? Northside Funders Group. We get anywhere between 3 to 10 pre-development requests every quarter from BIPOC developers and or businesses along mostly the West Broadway corridor. So every meeting, we're having to make decisions based on where's the property? If we make this investment now, is it gonna get seized through this project, right? So like, it's already, I just wanna, you know, double tap on the fact that it's already impacting investment decisions.
Yeah.
And thankfully, NFG up to now has been sort of just going based on faith and saying, let's just invest because at least it's moving forward of all that feels important. But at some point, there is a question, are resources just getting wasted right now?
Exactly.
And like, I have one that's coming up in 2 weeks that I have to recommend a decision on. So,
Yeah.
so what I want to name is that, you know, there are folks coming into this table who are clearly brought to this conversation because they have a job to build a blue line extension, and I get that. But I think you're late to a party that has been about redeveloping and reimagining what a corridor could look like that predates any conversations that relate to this blue line. And I know y'all know that. And so when we talk about this building is gonna get potentially some compensation and this one won't, the reality is that, and we've said this, that real estate along all across the north side is degraded. So regardless of whether one building is gonna get torn down, all of the buildings need either deep investment to be saved and or rebuilt. And so I think that also is a consideration to say, we don't just need to enable these businesses to stay in their space. We also need to think about, is that space dignified and worthy of the service and amenity that businesses are bringing to the corridor and are having the corridor, right? So again, I think like this historical amnesia that we're having as it relates to like the blue line is, I'm not saying that that's how everyone's showing up, but I just want to bring that back into the space.
Thank you.
I think one thing to think about the parking question is we have, you know, so many policies in the city about parking and so forth that we'll have to deal with in this project. But for me, it's, and maybe this is what Crystal was talking about when we've talked about with the project office is discussions with individual businesses. But when I hear people talking about, you know, like KB saying you wouldn't want to park behind the building, or people parking on the street have problems with insurance claims. And we've heard people talk about building ramps. For me, I think for all of us here to tackle that discussion, and maybe it's not this group, maybe it's the going out and talking with businesses. But what is the parking that helps the businesses best? Is it like next to your business, that vacant land, you know, making a surface parking lot there where people can drive in and get right into your business? Or is it a ramp down the end of the street? You know, we hear people say, well, we don't want a ramp down at the end of the street because I don't want to walk that far or whatever. So I think we need to put some work into what, not only just parking, but what is the parking that actually makes a business successful? Because we can build you a giant parking lot on Western Motor Site. Is that going to help anybody? You know what I mean?
It's not gonna help the
So
people that need to go down to the home health care.
Exactly. So I think we have to be thoughtful, and maybe not in this group, maybe it's just an action step. We've got to be thoughtful about what the parking solution is gonna be.
A lot of the lands that are next to or behind most of the buildings are city-owned properties.
Oh, I understand that, but if, you know, your people are saying, maybe I heard you wrong, but if people are saying they don't want to park behind the buildings, then is that the solution, you know, or is there a solution where you build parking behind the buildings with some sort of management strategy that addresses that. I don't know. You know, we've talked about that, even West Broadway Alive, the planning, all of that, the buildings on the south side of Broadway, about whether there should be parking built back there and so forth. It's been a discussion discussed to death, but I mean, those are things that we think about, you know.
I think the city should be having a conversation about how to get the properties that they own, especially on Broadway, into the community's hands and people that want to do things with them that are productive for the community. Because the building that I'm talking about precisely, they literally gave that building to someone else that wants to build, that property to someone that wants to build senior housing behind the building that someone owns, but they can't use it now. They can't use the parking lot because the city owns it. You know, so.
Yeah, it's like the communication is lacking majorly. It's like, oh, well, and sometimes I don't know what's going on, the city's picking and choosing, but my thing is if there's a business on a corridor that the city is aware that you can't put parking on that street, but then somebody comes along and says, okay, well, I want to buy this building from the city or from the county that's right behind this other business. Why is the communication not happening with that business first? They say, do you have interest in this land first? I've heard situations where a property owner had been asking for a piece of publicly owned land behind their building for the last 4 years. He's a Black man, he owns his building. And the 5 years, no, it's actually 6 years.
Yeah.
And he's been asking for this piece of land, and then the city went and approved somebody else for that property. Right? And I mean, I understand that other person has been able to do other projects in the past and they've been able to prove that they can do stuff, but why would you not let this person who owns their building, who's actually improving their building and looks really nice now, not be able to have first dibs on the plan so they can put some parking back there? That doesn't even make any sense.
That's just something I wanted to throw out there because that's also a stumbling block. Because when we get past all of the stuff that we're talking about, we get into this whole bureaucracy thing with the city and the county. And I hate to sound like an asshole, but we don't care about the bureaucracy. We didn't ask for this, you know, but we are actively trying to figure out how to litigate this. So we need the bureaucracy to get the hell out of the way because we are asking, we're trying to work with you all, but we're not getting any answers. And right now, most of the community, business-wise, we feel like we're the only ones making concessions to this entire process. But we're not getting any answers because when we ask questions, we get answers like, which valid as it is, you can't make any decisions. You can't make any decisions. But I have to live with it, right?
Well, who's making the decision?
That's a good question.
Speaking of that, someone that,
Everyone's pointing at everyone.
That's what bureaucracy is.
Someone that has been missing a lot from these like the CMCs and stuff is like the mayor. Do you all have an impression on where he stands with any of this? The mayor?
Sends Susan, his
But
staff.
they haven't been there though either. I haven't seen them. So I don't know who informs the mayor, where the mayor is with
We
any of
informed
this.
the mayor, but my time with the mayor, you know, our time with the mayor is limited, but we informed the mayor about all of this. But what I guess I was getting at, KB, is I don't want to discount what you just said, but we work in a giant bureaucracy too, and it's super tough. So it is helpful for me to understand those things. That like those are important issues to know, that a business owner has been asking for a parcel and yet it got sold to somebody else. That's something that I think we can bring back and say we've got to get our act together on these things.
Yeah, because I mean, I have to, that whole thing, I literally sent that to Eric.
I just feel like that wouldn't happen in other.
I think the question was the mayor, we don't care about the mayor. The commissioners, we don't even care about them because they're not the ones making the decisions. It's the city administrator and the county administrators that are actually making the decisions. So that's who we need to be talking to. Because they're the ones with the power, whether we have elected officials or not. We're not talking to the right people because elected officials have to go to these people to get things done. So these are the people that are making the decisions, and they're making those decisions in the dark.
Yeah.
So that's the conversation we need to be having. The mayor, the city council members, they're cute, but they're not the ones we need to be talking to. Even the commissioners, we need to be talking to the county administrator, because that's who everything goes through in the end.
Thank you. So
They got some say so, but everything goes to these individuals when it comes to getting things done. That's who makes the final decisions on getting stuff done. Otherwise, we'd have an effective procurement process already between the city and the county that actually included the people that are in their own cities. But we don't. Why? Because the mayor has a cute idea. Look, the city council, the city council, they got cute ideas on how to fix procurement. But the county administrator is the one that actually, the city administrator, they're the ones that actually make that decision. And they make decisions like doing business with businesses in St. Paul, as opposed to doing business with the businesses that are right in the borders. And they make an excuse on how that's effective. Despite what the mayor wants, despite what the city council wants, despite what the
Very true.
I see what you're saying. The commissioners are saying.
Very true.
In the end, we literally had this issue with my business.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And if I didn't know the person, they literally went to my mentor shop in St. Paul, who's not registered in Minneapolis, to do business with him. Over two businesses that are right in their borders. And I know that this is against what the elected officials want, but it still happened. So we need to be having those conversations with those people.
Yeah, it's very true.
And bringing the things that they are doing or not doing to the light.
I'm wasting your time because they want to quote.
They wasted a whole goddamn day on my time, but that's a whole nother thing. But those are the things that need to be brought to light, because they're the ones making the decisions on whether something goes forward or not. And they're doing it behind the scenes. And they push the commissioners and the mayor and the city council members out front to take the heat for it. But in the end, we want decisions made that are positive decisions for us. Those decisions need to make sure that those people are put out in front.
So we're at 3 minutes.
Sorry.
No, you're good. This is the discussion we wanted to have today during this morning. We're looking at a working lunch. If you can hear me in the Zoom room, do as you need to do. We'll be done at 2. Lunch is coming. And again, this is a discussion we wanted to have. So we can keep talking, and I'm gonna pass it to Dan. You were gonna say something?
I thought we were gonna be done at noon. That's what we talked about.
Oh, is it new one? I think I know it's 2 o'clock.
Well,
He said at the beginning, like,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
likely gonna be done by noon.
Oh, well, all right. Let's go me. So we were, oh, that's great. So just know that the next on the agenda, we are gonna be done at noon. That next area, and I think we've been talking about this robustly in this room, was this whole thing of what does this conversation mean for corridor-wide affirming outcomes and supporting policies, which I feel like we've really been thinking about corridor-wide just in this Minneapolis discussion. So, and I'm also okay with us taking a break right now too. That's perfectly fine before lunch comes. How are we doing?
I guess my question is like, if we don't feel like we're ready to leave the Minneapolis small group before jumping into corridor wide, what happens? And if it's 2 o'clock? I guess that's my question.
Oh, we just flip it out. We just make room for more discussion. Yeah, that's fine.
But now it's all updated now.
We need more time. That's fine. Yeah. So how about we just go ahead and take that 5-minute break? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you all.
No, that's all I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I've been noticing.
there's a lot of clearly, government elected officials are supposed to be making policy, right? So they make policy, and how it gets interpreted, how it gets implemented, how it gets done. there's a lot of leeway on staff to do that. So if you're talking about, you know, whatever department it may be, yeah, I can see what you.
I think they need to be part of this conversation. And we need, there are people that we need to be holding their feet to the fire first. Because they're the ones that are making the ultimate decision on whether something happens or doesn't happen or how it happens. And a lot of times they're doing things, you know, they've been able to operate in the dark for so long that they do what they do to benefit their people.
But any administrator could be redirected by policy, no doubt about that. If the board decides they want to implement a policy or change a policy, they can do that, and they will certainly, you know, reverse that trend.
Yes, if the policy has teeth, but none of these policies have teeth, so it allows them to do things. For instance, listen, I got an RFP for something in the city. They wanted something made, clothes. When I did the research, there was only one company that had access to those clothes.
Access to the supply.
They wanted a particular garment.
Got it, right.
There was only one company that had access to that, and they were not Black. They were not minorities at all. But the RFP specifically wanted those.
Prohibitively written spec.
It was to me, it was a very.
It was almost not prohibitively written, singularly written.
It was written to give it to the person that they wanted to give it to in the first place.
Yeah, basically.
So once we read that, we're done with it. Once we figured out that we're done, because you're not wasting any more of my time.
They weren't using any federal money.
I don't know what they were using. I mean,
Wasn't it
I
that,
don't care.
wasn't it that you had to get supply from that company and they wouldn't deal with companies that had operational budgets
Yes.
below $1 million?
Yes.
So that
Oh,
automatically
sure.
move out.
Okay.
And that's what they do. You set a policy, they figure out how to word their stuff around that policy to get what they want in the first place. So if the policy doesn't have any teeth, whatever, you know, it's wasted. So the conversation needs to be had with the people, or replacing the people that are in those positions that are, you know, as Coco said, contributing to the historical amnesia.
I get it. You can put in place a policy that looks really good.
Yeah.
But if its interpretation and implementation is not treated right, not doing any good.
Can you put a policy on the record of decision as a mitigation strategy, or is it only like money?
I think they can.
Yeah, I don't know why not. It might not read as a policy, but you write read as a, you will do this kind of a thing.
Because, yeah.
I mean, you have to be able to do that as mitigation tactics. 'Cause,
It's not
yeah,
you.
I'm sure.
That it should happen, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one was. I've seen that happen before, if you primarily, yeah, you know how. Restrictions that are highly. I used to talk all the time, technically specific, where you need to write a generic spec, but you write it and say. I did. Yeah, I don't. It turns out.
From the office of virtual reality. That's one thing. Yes. And the entire conversation we had. From 10 o'clock to 5:30. What they didn't understand was the person that they had already given the bid to was my mic. So I'm watching the entire conversation, but they didn't have 3 bids. So they walked us through, this.
Shop that's in St. Paul.
And
And we were the only minority business that's within their border that actually were in the bid process. You know what you tell me, but I literally have the email and the timeline And I'm watching them emailing my mentor saying, oh no, you have the bid, and go for it. As they're asking my little person for more information, you know, oh, can we get a call about this? Can we get a call about that? And it started at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 5:30, so we're gonna go to business. Never once did we say we couldn't provide no water, but we didn't have the information for me. And the information they gave my mentor was completely different than the information they gave me.
Yeah. But I mean, you can't be there forever.
So that's why I'm saying, the conversation is fine to have with the elected officials, but the people that are making the decisions are not the elected officials. And those are the people we need to be talking to.
I get it.
Because they're the ones that are literally fucking up this process.
I still think
I'm one of those people.
That's what I read. They were talking about helicopter rides.
You the censor of the day?
I've been told I can't say something. So they're messing up the entire process.
But I'm one of those people.
I'm sure
you can change the process. Stop sending me RFPs. 2014, you've never given us a
Right. You know what, the weird part is.
Yeah. You don't, I mean, you take 6 hours to say anything else. I'm just saying, you don't have low class Q that she.
That takes her time. Stuff that actually could benefit business.
If I did, I did find something.
You've never gotten a single thing out of
But you know what the funniest thing is? My daughter's like, I take that just free Wi-Fi. So I was like,
in those departments, because they know us. But as far as a city RFP process, I don't know what it is.
I don't use my cell phone.
People that are in St. Paul.
I use Wi-Fi.
It's frustrating, especially when it's not local.
I do more business with the city of New York than I do with my own county and city.
I taught her well. She is so thirsty. It's like pulling teeth to get money.
I wrote it.
That's fine.
Program ads and
That's funny. Because like, I used to work that day. They would have their beers, so I bought them like $1.
When did the setup
I think there's I think it just shows you have.
I would have been in the same place. That's why I said, but we have to prioritize business in our borders first. So we have to give this to this business. And I said, you know what, I respect it. But Minneapolis starts to begin to talk about projects. They go outside. They do not prioritize business.
I sometimes think I'm hearing that. I can't say for sure.
So implementation, it
Let's talk about
we can argue it all the time.
somehow it's in the metro area. Minneapolis is responsibility.
But nobody has to love the project. Part of the project is to at least let us talk. And so,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
we go away.
But I think the thing that you had said in the group that
I can show you multiple bids that we put in with the city.
all players involved
Outside of the city
is
limits.
being said. And I don't think there is.
It's like, why are we bidding in our own city if we pay our taxes?
I don't want one of the areas to be like, I didn't hear this. And we definitely don't want to, like, I'll take a good example. City commissioners. Oh, yeah, we're no. The meeting, the ADWG, you had a meeting today, everybody's been saying we're all on the same page, we're all heard the same thing. Because that's the thing that's always. And that way when it comes to decision making, it wasn't like, oh yeah, where's that? It's on now. It's on the drive, trust y'all, trust me. You know, it's just how are we gonna trust them? I can't.
Number one.
And I know it seems like it's tedious,
If
because
I
it's
got
like,
millions of
oh,
dollars,
let's just
you
get
sell me a land for $1, you sell me a probably more dollars. Right?
You start talking
And Reagan was trying to get the parking lot behind it.
This is just too much.
and they were like,
I mean, I know
you got
last year, it goes all the way to nurseries, but like, yeah. But now it's just wasn't for workers. Can just talk about, I mean, and then of course we're in college and I can't get any, but I'm gonna.
So I can find out that they gave the
And we're talking about this, but I'm doing like, free. We need to know how much money you go but at the same time,
they didn't ask anybody. But when I ask about yours, you tell me that you gotta ask if anyone else is interested.
So that's what we're doing.
We have a great George County table.
I don't know how to change that policy, but they pick and choose how they wanna enforce policies, so they wanna give this stuff to us. They gave the bailiff, they gave the bailiff the price of that, and he's buying it for $1.
we don't want them to stop. Well, they gotta stop right. I mean, it's been a while. That's right in the corner. Still people don't know. They're blowing away people don't realize what it is. There's no point in saying old. And think about what
That's right. I agree with that. I like that.
Controversial building that you're not agreeable with, and there's a parking lot behind your building that you sit down and everybody's like, there's no excuse to sell that parking lot to someone else.
I swear.
Square's right next to my building.
I want to get out of here.
City doesn't maintain Green Square. White Club. I don't know who they paid.
One time, I was the fool. I was packed up in a suit.
Every exclusive you go by.
Everything is related is like a bad thing.
They've been on backwards.
They really
But the mere fact that he has, you give stuff to them for an hour.
I mean, great, I mean, as an organizer, I would give the neighborhoods, the Southwest, people have done a great job disorganizing. I mean, from the inflating to getting into the items.
People got their drinks wrong.
They used to remember, they used to come to Harrison and talk about like what they were doing just to keep us in the loop. They make it all pretty, have their shores, and it's like, what is this gonna do to like the future light rail?
You don't give a damn.
And I'm surprised it didn't tank in LX fast. And they come ribbing to
That's a good thing. Could stay. That's good.
All about 37.
How do we get that?
This good old lady.
That's called free. Sometimes get a little.
And you know, it's gone. It was
That one I
So we're doing a
I understand, I would never but he was just like, so I just love those, there's that meeting they had, and that, yeah, what about the red team? Was that what it was? Oh, sorry to get over this, so anyways, yeah, if you could just pass this to Chuck, yeah. In St. Paul, I'm not gonna be my email. I used to go into Chuck's office, I always like, there were these like fire, right? Just to really get an idea, oh, like what are things that keep an eye and he just too, but it was just really good to get a fresh I was in Glenwood, so I was in there to like make some nice buildings. I never knew that.
okay, we need equity, how do we create the health equity, whatever. So yeah, something like that needs to be very hard.
No, they send other people, but they're still.
No, so
Like Sunny.
I do wonder if his brother. That was the whole chuck. That was the chuck wrap.
But he had other people. Think about how long we've been on. Because we can.
Y'all are getting older.
And I know my children will because they
Well, we know
I'm serious, because when I get old, I don't want to drive, I want to take the train, I want to take the train, where I can make a lot of money.
All right, y'all. Let's do the thing. All right. Hopefully, folks online are here. All right, everybody, take your places. Sit down. I want to leave. Sit down.
Okay,
Let's
we're
do
coming
it.
back together.
There it is. We're getting out of here is what we're gonna do. That's the food plan. You can go anywhere you want for food.
Who told us there was working lunch?
I thought there was a work, but we're good. There's a working lunch outside the building.
All right, let's do this thing. Okay, so what we're gonna do really quickly is we're just gonna give sort of an overview. Maybe if you just get the facilitators just to talk generally about the conversation that happened. Sounds like the conversation in here was a little bit hotter than the one in the other room. So that's cool. So if we can do that, maybe Margaret or Malik can give just sort of an overview of the things that you talked about, and I'll do the same thing for Brooklyn Park and Robbinsdale and Crystal. And then I think we're gonna get out of here pretty closely after that. So I think what's gonna happen is that we don't have all the work group members here, and we wanna make sure that they get a chance to sort of visualize. And there's additions, I think, that are to the both groups. And so I think what we're gonna do is basically send out digitally, and then either do an online meeting or just have some way to sort of communicate just by email to just affirm what's in there and what's not, to move forward from there.
Hey, you owe me lunch, man.
That's fine. I have talked to my brother right there. Okay, I don't control food. I just want to be clear about that. I hear you. So Margaret and can you guys come up to the mic just so the folks online can hear you and or that kind of thing? That sound good?
And I tried to take as many notes as possible, but I am sure that I'm missing some stuff. Really, a lot of it was focused on sort of this idea that a lot of things needed to start much earlier, and that any solutions have to be, especially for small businesses, have to be in place well before construction happens. Because people are planning out on very long timelines, and that, you know, if a business is planning 3 or 5 years out, they need to be thinking today, starting today, finding places to go today in order to survive the construction process. Also, that each individual business has very different needs, and especially because there are so many distressed properties along Broadway, that we need to have a system for understanding business by business, individually, what kind of investment needs to happen in whether it's construction of new buildings or it's fixing the existing buildings. And one of the big challenges around that is uncertainty still about the project and which specific properties are going to be impacted. And then in many ways, the community doesn't have the ability to wait for certainty about every answer before policies are put into place. We had a lot of conversation about business success, and in particular issues related to parking as well too, and both the direct and indirect impacts. In particular, issues related to adjacent properties and making sure that businesses have an opportunity to acquire properties or take advantage of opportunities for addressing parking needs adjacent to their businesses. And a lot of this is about accessibility as well too for businesses. For example, some of the healthcare businesses who are providing services where they don't have you can't drop somebody off 2 blocks away from the doctor's office, right? You need to be right there, and that needs to be accessible. We need a better way to understand that. There was also a lot of conversation, kind of a moment of clarity, I think, where somebody asked the question, you know, do people actually want the light rail to begin with? Like, and are people seeing any benefits from this at all? And I think the answer from KB is like, kind of, we don't care, but what we need to know is what the impacts are going to be and how those are going to be directly addressed and mitigated. People want clear and honest answers, and that is kind of like the most important thing, is folks are planning for the future. And then we also had some conversation about sort of like who has the power to make decisions to begin with, like who are pulling the levers. Because if you want to create accountability for the outcomes of whatever policies are put into place, there needs to be accountability associated with that. Good ideas are good ideas, but that doesn't mean anything if they don't actually matter on the ground. And then we talked a little bit about trying to figure out real specificity, and maybe we're not there yet, but having an actual number for what it would cost to acquire the land, what it would cost to fix up the properties, what it would cost to mitigate the impacts of what's happening, because that can be very, very concrete. And then also that one of the challenges overall is that we need some form of reparations for the lack of investment historically in organizations, in anchor organizations on the north side, because a lot of organizations are operating in a really precarious place. They need so much more capacity to be able to support the businesses and the people along the corridor, and that doesn't get addressed overnight. And unless we've got time and money to invest in organizations and institutions, and that is sustained, that organizations will not be in a position to have the capacity necessary to mitigate the issues and address the harms and make sure people can access whatever benefits may occur from the development of the light rail and sort of associated development near it. And unless we address that, then no amount of money is going to fix things, because people won't be able to access the resources who need the resources. Am I missing anything?
Drop the mic. Thank you.
It's gonna be a better hand clap than that.
Oh, no, that was.
Thank you. I just don't like we can't hand claps. Just do it all the way if you're gonna do it. All right, that sounds, thank you for that, y'all. What'd you say? This guy. This is not what this meeting is about. Thank you for that, y'all. I'm really encouraged in the vulnerability and honesty of that conversation. It helps me understand a little bit more of what y'all were. I was briefly talking to Christelle and Coco and Margaret before that. We had, it sounds like a different energy of a conversation in the Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park conversation, but some similar themes came up, I think, as well, too. We've got a lot of good ideas, I think, laid out already that's in the documents, but some really good additions as well, too. One thing that I think the last thing that you were saying, Margaret, and what the Minneapolis group was saying, that idea around capacity building for nonprofits and other groups to sort of have the capacity to do this work is a really important thing. That came up. Victoria was really good about bringing that point and was supported in the room as well, too. And, you know, we had a pretty good, healthy conversation, I think, about the last time there was a very significant program building out the capacity of nonprofits. We talked a lot about NRP, which I think I talked about a little bit last time in this group as well, too, as an example of governments have done that before. They have built out the capacity for the efforts of keeping people in place. And we're talking about that perhaps in a different way today, but that idea is not old in this region. In fact, it's probably one of the most effective programs in the country to do that very exact thing. And so we talked a lot about capacity building, and certainly that seems right and to do. Talked about renters' rights for small businesses or renters of commercial space in general. Community ownership as an outcome, and there's of course a lot of different ways in order to do that, but certainly of interest in the communities and in that group. Developing mixed income housing, so talked a lot about sort of racial income stratification across the corridor, and how to sort of address that. So it's not just building affordable housing, but it's about sort of a wide range of housing for folks. And we had a good discussion about, it's not about, like there will be development, and it's like make space for new residents, but not necessarily, or not displacing current residents in order to make that happen. In fact, make the infrastructure and support for them better as a result of this work at the end of the day. Talked about inclusionary zoning for commercial spaces as well, too. So one of the conversations that came up in Robbinsdale Crystal last time and showed up in this conversation too was right now there's a lot of pressure on housing property taxes because there's a very low commercial property tax base in those cities. And so one of the strategies to mitigate that over the long term is to develop more commercial spaces to sort of balance or depressurize property taxes for housing. We were in a conversation about wealth building, and I think, you know, it gets to, I think, what Ricardo really did well of framing last time, is preparing, surviving, and thriving, this aspect of what does thriving mean in the long term. And of course, we talked about in the context of leaving infrastructure better after this project is done versus just getting it back to as close as it is today, but in fact, build it better. And Sophia was really good about bringing up this idea of how do we build resilient communities as a result of this project. So, you know, as you know, building a transit system that allows folks to move and live in a place that is preparing for the next 40 years of their life, or for wherever they are, not just, you know, what gets them to the light rail and those sort of things. But in that conversation about wealth building, right, in this aspect of thriving, right, it's of course we want folks to survive and stay as a result of the Blue Line being built in the context of anti-displacement. But over time, we're trying to balance or to transform the disparities across this region. And so there's this conversation about what role does wealth building play a role in this too. And I think we've kind of got to refine the language and the intentionality around that, but that was certainly present in our conversation as well too. We also talked a little bit about, sorry, just get to the right page. In terms of like the regional priorities, and I think this is important, I think, for everybody to think about, is thinking about what is the body that, of course, is going to hold this corridor accountable to delivering any of the outcomes that we've talked about, right? And it's not just what local funds come out of this project, but it's the regional and corridor-wide funds that probably come from a mix of county, Met Council, federal government, foundations, and those sort of things. But having somebody that holds this and holds this corridor accountable to living through the vision that's being talked about at this table. And on the conversation about workforce, we talked a little bit about, it's not just about developing the workforce of this, but it's about developing the economic development capacity of this corridor as well too. And so we talked about that as well. So overall, a pretty good conversation. In addition, those are all things in addition to what's currently in the document for each of those communities. But ultimately, I don't know, we came back happy, I think, into the conversation. So that was good. Anybody want to add anything in addition for either of the groups in terms of what we talked about today? Yeah.
That was a great point that you brought up. I don't know the conversation with you and Sophia about how you make the community better than, we've always, it seems as if we've been in the conversation of surviving and then sustaining what we do have, but we haven't talked about the overall investment making the community or a destination site through this huge investment of the land. I appreciate you guys having that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Terry. Anybody else want to add anything into here?
I guess something for me that seemed hopeful, it's like the notion that if we're able to mitigate not mitigate, but including the record of decision, some of these strategies that the municipalities are more, or at least that's what I perceive, they seem for the solutions to be more feasible if the feds are paying for half of it. So it seems to me like there was some agreement in trying to get as many of these strategies in the record of decision so they can be kind of like legally obligated to make them happen, and they can also access a funding mechanism to allow them to actually get it done.
Right.
So for me, that was like kind of like a bit of hope in that conversation of, in all these very sometimes intangible or long-term things, this seems to be something that we can like touch, that we know who's making, like making the report, we know the staff, we know all these people that I feel we can hold accountable to ensure that that happens. Right. So personally, it felt kind of like a good outcome of that conversation to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. The last thing I just wanted to bring up, because I think this is a really important point, Kim kind of brought up this point in the conversation about recruiting and building a better conversation with foundations and transforming the narrative from foundations about some of these suburban communities. And we kind of got into this conversation about a lot of the population that foundations been focused on are moving out, being displaced out of Minneapolis and St. Paul into these suburban communities. And that they still have this trouble connecting to foundations to connect with those same populations because they don't necessarily believe that those folks are there yet, right? But there's this idea about transforming and fully living a full narrative about the corridor and where folks are and about that. And I think that's an important aspect of our conversation as well too. Okay, y'all. So what I'm going to propose is we're going to refine these documents from our conversation today. So there's some additions clearly from all the groups that we need to make into here. We'll email that out no later than next week so that everybody can see it. The important thing that I'm hoping that folks see is that your voice is in these documents, because these documents more or less sort of will build out what the report will be about in terms of recommendations, right? So do we have the right outcomes here? Are the policies reflective of getting us to those outcomes? And I'm here for whatever challenge that y'all see in it, right? Which clearly y'all see and are right to see the challenge and get there. But what I'm hoping that we see in this document is our pathway to addressing them. And if we don't have that, then it needs to be in this document, right? And from there, once we feel good about that as a group, I want to get the affirmation from this group by way of a vote. And when I say vote, I mean, like, I'll be asking folks, do we have these right set of things in here? I don't really feel the contentiousness in the room that the outcomes or the policies are wrong. So I'm assuming that this will be the vast majority of y'all will say yes to what's in this document. And from there, we'll build out our final report from the document, having these as recommendations. And the hope is to have that done, at least our final report done by March 10th is the date that we're hoping to have it done by. But that would depend on a little bit on how quickly we get through affirming this document in there, the outcomes that are in this document. There will be I think I'm comfortable saying, I think that you're okay with saying, there will be a phase 2 of this work, of course, right? There's delivery of this, but then there's doing this, right? Which of course is the harder part of doing these things. That hasn't been fully defined or materialized. That's something that I know Hennepin County, the Met Council will be looking to do over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, huge aspects of strategizing around each of these individual recommendations, communicating these recommendations to various groups, which includes community. I don't think Hennepin County or the Met Council views it as sufficient to just have public open houses to deliver this work. There certainly will be an intentionality to work with probably the organizations that y'all work with and deeply get into the community in such a way that folks know what's going on in this work and hopefully see what they need in these recommendations as well too. But we'll communicate about Hennepin County Met Council. I'm sure Kira, along with them, will be communicating about what that phase 2 looks like when that sort of materializes, I'm assuming over the next couple of weeks or however much time that it takes to do that. But for now, I hope y'all feel seen in this process. Hope y'all feel seen in terms of like your voice is reflected. Like we heard your frustrations, we heard your hopes, we heard your ideas. And at the end of the day, that should be reflected in this document and the final report as a whole and in the communication about this project as a whole. I certainly appreciate that everybody took the time over the past, we've been meeting for a year and a month now to do this, which is a very long period of time. And y'all probably forgotten all the things that we talked about the very first time, but it's been a lot. And I think I'm very proud of that. And I hope y'all do as well. Y'all feel that same way. I do think we're giving each of these ideas their best possible chance to happen. We can't control them happening, but I think we're giving them their best possible chance to be seen in the right light of day. So thanks to all of you. Thanks for coming. Now get out of here and we'll talk to y'all very soon.
Super quick question. So is the implementation plan aimed to be completed by March 10th, or is the implementation plan aimed to be produced on phase 2?
The implementation plans of these. So no, the report from this process will be done by March 10th. The implementation plan will be, I would assume, the first part of phase 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, we will do the same parking thing as last time with Kristen at the bottom of over there. And Can we have a good hand clap before we leave? All right, cool. All right, y'all. We'll talk very soon. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for coming.
Bien complicado.